This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about for the continent and beyond. But first, a quick run through the markets. Trading did start pretty late on the JSE today. The bourse did struggle to process a big batch of transactions from the 17th of August, apparently. Roughly $9.7 billion worth of shares traded yesterday, way higher than anything. It goes back to a 2008 time series from Bloomberg. Funds rebalancing their holdings between Naspers and Prosus to reflect the former smaller weighting at the JSE was responsible for that trading spike. Tencent did report some decent Q2 numbers. Net income up almost 30% at $6.5 billion. Revenue is up 20% to $21.3 billion for Q2. Revenue from gaming, though, has been in decline since the third quarter of 2020. And remember, that's a sector that's getting quite a crackdown from regulators in China. Here's what's coming up tonight. South Africa unveils plans for a new state-run pension fund. We'll have the details. Inflation in Nigeria eases for the fourth consecutive month in July. And retail associations in the US are mounting pressure on President Biden to resume trade talks with China. Our starting point tonight is in South Africa, specifically with that country's pension system. South Africans may soon be required to contribute up to 12% of their earnings to a new government-backed fund if a set of proposals we're looking at the moment are approved. Earlier this week, the Department of Social Development released a green paper on comprehensive social security and retirement reform, and that proposes the creation of a new National Social Security Fund. It's a government-managed fund that will provide both, actually not just both, but retirement, disability and unemployment benefits. While employers and employees will initially be obliged to contribute up to 12% of qualifying earnings, up to a ceiling which is currently proposed at about $18,400 a year. Effectively, that means South Africans will be paying about $184 a month to that particular fund. The first 10% of that contribution will go into the mandatory fund rather than a retirement fund. The next 2% will go into unemployment insurance. All right, then, so let's explore some of these proposals in the Green Paper in detail. Pete Snell is the Tax Project Director at the South Africa Institute for Chartered Accountants. He's joining us now live on the program. Thank you for your time this evening. So how does the current system of pension contributions and unemployment benefits look like compared to what is being proposed in this Green Paper?
Yes, good evening to you and thank you. The current retirement savings regime is that it's persons in employment that will generally contribute to a pension fund or provident fund of their employer. And if the individual is not in employment, they will contribute to a retirement annuity fund. So it's where you have a formal employment arrangement and the employer has a pension and provident fund, you will contribute to that fund, and if not, to a retirement annuity fund. These contributions are not mandatory, prescribed by government, that is. It normally flows from your employment contract. That is the requirement of you as an employee to contribute that. You contribute roughly, and that gives you some tax deductions. You contribute roughly up to a maximum of 27.5% of your remuneration on an annual basis. And those contributions, of course, with the growth in the fund, then provides the retirement benefit at the end of your employment career when you retire. The unemployment benefits one is a mandatory contributory fund, and there both the employee and the employer contributes, and currently each of them would contribute 1% of their the employee's monthly remuneration up to a maximum. So that's the current regime. So the retirement fund is you contribute to the fund, and at retirement you're able to withdraw from the fund. The unemployment fund, there's a mandatory contribution, but when you only benefit when you are no longer employed as an employee. And then the benefits are roughly between 38 and 60% of your salary at the time, up to a certain maximum.
Okay, so this 12% contribution number we're seeing in the Green Paper, is that an equal 50-50 split between the firms and their employees, or is it 12% from both parties?
It's not clear from the government, from the Green Paper. And I must say that this Green Paper is open for comment until the end of December. So we will get more detail as time passes. This is not very clear from it. But at the moment, the definite split that they do say is that the 12% will be split in two parts. 10% will go to this new mandatory new retirement fund, with 2% going to the current unemployment insurance fund. So they retain the current unemployment insurance fund. It is then stated in the Green Paper that all employers and employees will initially be obliged to contribute up to 12% of qualifying earnings. And up to a certain ceiling. So they bring in a ceiling of roughly 23,000 Rand per month, saying that an individual will contribute 3,300 Rand per year. Now, what it looks like is that there will be also an obligation on the employer to make a contribution to the fund, and not only on the employee. But the proposal is not that clear, because one would generally, when the employer contributes, as I often do, to your retirement fund, they take it out of the cost to company. So they agree that they'll pay you a salary, a portion they will contribute to the retirement fund, and a portion they will contribute, or the individual will contribute. So it's not clear whether the employer contribution will become a cost to the employer and a cost to the employee, which makes it 24% contribution.
Indeed. So ultimately, though, will these contributions to this fund, assuming these proposals to go through, will these contributions have to be mandatory, or will individuals have the option to say, no, I like my current system, I like the way it works, I like the flexibility, so I'll stick with that instead?
It looks like they will build in a bit of flexibility, but it's absolutely clear from the information that's available now that this will be a compulsory contribution. So they expect that workers who earn a higher income will divide their contributions between the new Social Security Fund and private sector fund. So they specifically mentioned this, that there is an expectation that people that can afford it will, of course, contribute to both funds. So, but the first 12% is absolutely mandatory. It will be based on the earnings of the person during that period, and will also contribute to the benefit at the end of the day. So they will encourage people that earn more than this compulsory contribution levy to contribute to private funds, and they make mention of the tax benefit there is to persons to do that contribution there.
Okay, one last question for you. The country already has an unemployment insurance fund. You mentioned how, in passing how it works already. So what exactly is this new proposal trying to set up with this, or rather trying to cure with this omnibus fund?
Yeah, there are a number of objectives that they've set out in the Green Paper. But I think it's to address some of the current problems that we have. So yes, the unemployment insurance fund is there, but it doesn't provide benefits on retirement. And at the moment, in terms of the legislation, the maximum period that you can benefit from the unemployment fund, and remember, you only benefit when you lose your job, so to speak, and that may be on retirement, is 8 months. So it doesn't give a long-term benefit from the fund. And the new National Security Fund will do that. It will give a much longer benefit period. Another problem is that the unemployment insurance fund benefits are only available to employees, similar to what I've said, that typically the retirement industry is also aimed at employees. So self-employed individuals, business owners, and informal workers that are not in formal employment will not benefit from that. And our problem is that, so the contributions to the unemployment insurance fund doesn't lead to post-retirement benefits. And notoriously, our South African public is not very good at saving for their retirement. And this is why this one of the main purposes of this government fund, that they will then have this compulsory benefit. And another problem or compulsory fund. Another problem is that when employees change employment, they often tap into their retirement funds to settle debt and things like that. It looks like this new fund, which combines all of this into one, will not enable you to withdraw from that. So the money is there, it's protected until you retire. There's also a proposal to do away with the road accident fund benefits, and also to incorporate that into the retirement and into this new retirement vehicle. But of course, we'll have to wait and see the detail that comes through.
Indeed, some interesting proposals. We'll see how this conversation does evolve between now and December. Peter Nell there, the tax project director of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. Let's head up north. Tunisia has paid off a bond loan of over $500 million issued on the international market in 2016. The North African state had also repaid another loan of $500 million in late July. It was secured from the international markets back in 2014. This is as it moves to honour obligations for both medium and long-term foreign debt. CGTN's Adin Chouachi has the details.
The Central Bank of Tunisia announced that the country's net foreign exchange reserves fell to $6.84 billion, or 120 days of import on August 5th, from $7.3 billion, which corresponds to 129 days at the end of July. Analysts warned that the settlement of US bonds has had a disastrous impact on the economy.
We know also that these two loans have been paid in a very bad way, financially and economically speaking, of course, because the state didn't have the money, and the state had to issue very short-term treasury bills for 3 months only, and the treasury bills were subscribed by the Tunisian banks but bought back the same day by the Central Bank of Tunisia, which meant that the loans have been paid through the creation of currency, which is extremely dangerous for the general balances and equilibriums in the Tunisian economy.
The executive board of the Apex Bank said the lower mobilization of foreign exchange resources in the form of loans and foreign investments have also impacted the foreign balance of payment, bringing down net foreign exchange reserves.
I think what we need is a minimum of $3 to $5 billion needed immediately to start to build the trust again with the international financial market and reassure the market that the Tunisian debt remaining until the end of the year at least will be paid normally and not with a recourse to issuing currency like we did on July 23 and August 5.
Authorities in Tunis are encouraging the country's diaspora to increase remittances in 2021. The central bank governor said these remittances accounted for 32% of Tunisia's foreign exchange reserves in 2019.
Tunisian diaspora remittances are important for the national economy, but there are many obstacles like the exchange rate and the lack of digitalization of some Tunisian banks. Only 22% of our diaspora abroad are interested in investing at home due to a lack of political clarity of the situation in the country and a lack of visibility on investment opportunities.
According to the 2021 state budget, debt services have been impacted by the exchange rate of the Tunisian dinar against the main currencies. Euro-denominated loans represents 54.9% of Tunisian debts, followed by the dollar, which account for 22.3%.
According to the Finance Department and Tunisia's Apex Bank, the interest on public debts that will be repaid in 2021 amounts to approximately $1.5 billion. It is down 2.2% compared to 2020. Adin Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
Authorities in Egypt have announced that the new administrative capital, which is nearly complete, will apparently be listed on the Egyptian stock market in the next 48 months. Now, the city is being built about 45 kilometers east of Cairo. It's being designed as a high-tech model, if you will, for Egypt's future, and it's expected to be home to some 6 million residents. CGTN's Yasser Kim explains how it'll work.
It's the first time in Egypt's history that a city will float shares on the country's stock exchange. Known simply as the new administrative capital, the new city is designed to operate with smart technology on virgin land, away from the clutter and chaos of the current capital, Cairo.
We are planning to list the new capital in the stock exchange very soon, and its financial coverage will be a special company fund. We are talking about liquid cash of $6.5 billion. It's a new approach in administrating our projects and making it profitable without paying money. We expect that 2 years after the IPO of the new capital, its assets will reach $190 to $200 billion.
The new administrative capital sits on a 170,000 fidans area east of Cairo. It's nearly finished and expected to host over 6 million people in addition to the presidential palace, the government, parliament and embassies. Experts have welcomed the new administrative capital.
The state has been preparing for several years to float shares of major institutions such as banks, petroleum companies, and successful companies that have been profitable, and lately it's the new capital company. Listing shares of such profitable companies will give a major boost to the economy and to the Egyptian stock market and increase trading volumes at the EGX.
The new capital is one of 27 new cities under construction around the North African state to move the growing population out of the crowded Nile Valley and create new urban communities in the extended, deserted areas at a cost of tens of billions of dollars. This is a huge financial burden on a developing nation. However, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has made it clear the state budget will not incur any cost for the huge mega projects.
It's a successful policy as the state didn't use any of its own money. The land of the administrative capital was all desert land, but the government divided the area, announced plans for having a new city and provided incentives for construction companies. Developers came pouring into buying the new plots of land. With the down payments, the government has built the infrastructure for the cities, the administrative buildings and state facilities at the new capital as well. More foreign investors are now joining in to buy more land and construct housing and commercial complexes in the new cities. It's a very profitable policy by the government.
The government is now adopting the same approach on all new developmental projects, including in agriculture, construction of roads, bridges, infrastructure and public transport. Yes Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
I'll run through some company news now. Starts in East Africa with Total Energy Kenya. It's reported a 50% improvement in half-year earnings for 2021. The firm's net earnings jumped to $15.5 million at the end of the first half, compared to $10 million at the end of the first half of 2020. Total Energy is attributing that good performance to what they say is a decent economic recovery seen in Kenya, at least in the first half of the year. The life insurer Old Mutual has beefed up its COVID-19 provisions by over $134 million to cover potential death claims arising from the third wave of infections. They're saying that the situation was worse than initially expected. That said, the performance of its non-life businesses in the 6 months to end June softened the blow of the pandemic. Life insurers have been forced to set aside billions of rand in reserve as COVID-19 has led to a spike in mortality claims. IKEA, the world's biggest furniture brand, is branching out into selling renewable energy to households, starting with its home market of Sweden in September. The Enka Group, the owner of most IKEA stores worldwide, said that households will be able to buy affordable renewable electricity from solar and wind parks and track their usage through an app. And finally, the fast food chain Nando's has been forced to temporarily shut down more than 40 outlets in the UK, or roughly 10% of its restaurant footprint. This comes as staff shortages hit its chicken supply chain in the latest blow to the country's hospitality sector. Retailers, restaurants, cafes, bars are all struggling apparently to recruit enough staff in the UK ever since the economy emerged from pandemic restrictions earlier this year. This comes after workers left the sector and in some cases the country in the wake of Brexit. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's on the other side. Inflation in Nigeria eases for the fourth consecutive month in July. And Angola has rolled out over $800 million in credit. We'll have the details when we come back.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back to the program. Headline inflation in Nigeria is our next focus. It dipped for the fourth consecutive month in July to around 17.4%, thanks to a slowdown in food price increases. Now, that's ahead of second quarter output data that comes out next week. Food price inflation makes up the bulk of the headline number. It eased about 80 basis points compared to the month before, down to 21.03% in July, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. That said, core inflation, which now strips out food price elements, that was up about 63 basis points to 13.7%. Economic growth has resumed in Nigeria after the COVID-19 shock, but it still lags well behind the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, according to the World Bank. It cites a combination of food inflation, heightened insecurity, particularly up north and in the belt of the country, stalled economic reforms, and it says that all of these factors combined are increasing poverty in Africa's most populous nation. The Nigerian Communications Commission says it's exceeded its projected revenue to be raised from spectrum license fees for 2021. Cash raised from spectrum fees in the first 5 months of 2021 was over 400% higher than the comparable period a year earlier. But what does this then imply about data consumption and, more importantly, affordability in Nigeria? CGTN's Deji Badmus sought some answers.
It's a piece of good news for Nigeria, which has been struggling to shore up government revenue and cut down on borrowing. The Nigerian Communications Commission says its target from spectrum license fees for 2021 was around $87 million. But in the first 5 months of the year alone, it has raked in over $364 million. And this is at a time when every other sector of the economy has been badly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The question around spectrum was really around the issue to do with the congestion on the networks during the COVID-19 lockdown from March 2020 to present. It was very apparent by the industry that access to temporary spectrum or more spectrum was needed. And what we witnessed was the conclusion of some mergers and acquisitions made by some of the players who had acquired spectrum from dormant users of spectrum holders. So both the spectrum trading mechanism introduced by NCC in 2018 and the request to have access to dormant spectrum led to the increase in spectrum fees witnessed and reported by NCC in their latest report.
Nigeria's ICT sector has been one of the few bright spots of the economy since the COVID-19 pandemic struck last year. In the first quarter GDP figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics in May, it recorded a growth rate of 7.9%, contributing 9.91% to the total nominal GDP. Analysts say the NCC is even poised to rake in more revenue as the country prepares to auction 5G licenses by the end of this year.
If you look at the Nigerian Broadband Plan of 2020-2025, it is very apparent that the plans of NCC vis-a-vis what they expect and what is actually happening demonstrates that the growth of bandwidth and the requirement for further spectrum will only increase. And that's due to the fact that everyone is now working online and are using different platforms to engage both at work, if you're working from home, or schooling, if you are actually doing hybrid schooling. And there are other services that are reliant on the internet. So we can only see the requirement for the spectrum to increase.
Nigeria's broadband penetration rate is at 42%. The NCC hopes to push that up to 70% by 2025. That would, of course, mean more revenue for government. But beyond revenue, affordability still remains an issue. The cost of internet data is still very high. The NCC is hoping to bring it down to around 22 cents per gigabyte by 2025. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Banks in Angola have issued nearly $900 million worth of credit since last April. That's according to the National Bank of Angola. New lending by commercial banks until July totaled over $500 million. That's up 10% compared to June's figure. Nearly 60% of this in the private sector went to large firms, with medium-sized ones taking up around 38% of the credit issued. Angola is Africa's second largest crude oil exporter. Its economy contracted by at least 5% in 2020. That was its worst performance since independence, as the COVID-19 pandemic swept around the globe. We're still in that general region. The Southern African Development Community, or SADC as it's more commonly known, has concluded its annual Heads of State and Government Summit in Lilongwe, Malawi. This is the 41st such meeting of the 16-member regional group. Angela Coppola has the details.
The group meets at a crucial point in its history. Its member states are facing numerous challenges.
It is a time for us as a region to rebuild and recapacitate our productive resources. Now is the time for us to fully unleash our people's entrepreneurial capacities. Now is the time for us to set up productive linkages for achieving structural and industrial transformation. Now is the time for us to turn the SADC we want into the SADC we enjoy.
Peace and security in the region remain a growing concern, and SADC's organ on politics, defence and security has been very active in the last 12 months, especially dealing with the situation in northern Mozambique.
The decision made by this summit to have the United Republic of Tanzania host the Regional Counterterrorism Center under the SADC Regional Counterterrorism Strategy and Action Plan is a step in the right direction. That center will be yet another demonstration of our resolve to give no room to terrorism and radicalism and to keep our community peaceful.
The regional bloc has a plan to industrialize member countries, and it's driven by the outgoing Executive Secretary, Dr. Stegomina Lawrence Tax. President Chakwera acknowledged her contribution.
Because you have achieved great milestones during your tenure, including formulating and operationalization of the SADC Industrial Strategy and Roadmap, SADC Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan, our ISDP, for 2020 to 2030, and the SADC Vision 2050, among others.
As the new chair takes up office, the regional bloc is faced with several challenges. First of all, dealing with the economic impact of COVID. Secondly, trying to increase cross-border trade between members. And thirdly, dealing with the insurgents in northern Mozambique. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
According to new research by the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in South Africa, roughly 45% of food supply in the country is wasted. And that impacts the economy, it affects water security, and of course it does contribute to climate change. Here's CGTN's Angela Coppola with the details.
The breakdown of wastage in that relatively long supply chain is concerning because of its impact on food security.
Wastage is happening at processing and packaging stage. There it is 49%. Then we have 19% at post-harvest handling and storage and 18% at household level. And the rest is then made up of 8% at farm level and 6% at distribution.
The council found that 10.3 million tonnes of food is wasted in the country every year. A significant amount of that is at household level.
And there the wastage is now more than 3 times what we previously estimated. And that is quite a concern to us. It clearly indicates that the South African consumer is a lot more aligned with the consumption levels that we see in developed countries as compared to the rest of sub-Saharan Africa.
The research did highlight a few more areas of concern when compared to the rest of Africa.
And then processing, also our wastage there is a lot higher, but it's also because South Africa has 3 or 4 big processing chains that does the processing as compared to a lot more smaller SMMEs doing processing in the rest of sub-Saharan Africa.
The report doesn't carry solutions, but these are carried in a separate document.
The main wastage is happening as a result of poor planning throughout the supply chain. Poor planning of what is planted, what is pushed onto the market, right up to household level, poor planning in terms of shopping, in terms of meal preparation, and all the rest.
The wastage happens all along the food chain, from the farms all the way through to the consumers, and something has to be done in order to improve food security in South Africa. I'm Angelo Koppler for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Tunisia has launched a project to finance women business leaders and entrepreneurs. The initiative aims to grant microloans to female entrepreneurs in order to allow them to boost their business activities, especially in the wake of the downturn caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's CGTN's Alan Chouachi with this report from Tunis.
The Tunisian Minister of Women, Family and Seniors announced that $18 million will be dedicated to financing women in business over a period of 5 years. More than 8,400 Tunisian women will benefit from this project.
We have launched this new project by taking into consideration the needs of women in each region. Women in Tunisia are different and talented. We will give credit and microcredit to female entrepreneurs, but also to vulnerable women who are victims of violence, those who left prison, and handicapped women.
The minister added that her department, as well as different state structures, will support thousands of SMEs led by women. According to the Women's Affairs Ministry, more than 90% of female-founded companies have been hit by the coronavirus crisis.
We have created economic groupings in all regions to support women entrepreneurs and female business leaders whose small or medium-sized enterprises and economic models were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. This health crisis has paralyzed the economy and caused losses to women in top management positions or ordinary female workers.
President Kais Saied visited a group of women artisans in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Tunisia. The head of state declared that guaranteeing women's economic and social rights is the responsibility of the state, as well as their employers in the private sector.
I know that your job is very difficult. I am aware of your situation. Women's economic and social rights are neglected. You deserve to get all your rights. Women are not at the core to show and pretend that women's rights are respected. Your right is to work and get paid in dignity.
Tunisian civil society organizations have urged the state to promote the conditions of women working in the sectors of agriculture and industry, female micro-entrepreneurs, and unemployed female graduates.
Despite the negative repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic on SMEs and on the national economy, many Tunisian women entrepreneurs have succeeded in preserving jobs and ensuring sustainable business growth. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
For years now, Zimbabwe has been grappling with prolonged power shortages as demand for electricity has outweighed the internal power generation capacity. Now, though, the government is embarking on scaling up solar projects, especially off-grid ones, and that's aimed at increasing the available generation capacity. CGTN's Wilkis Tanyabwa has that report.
Zimbabwean authorities recently approved 39 solar power projects to aid in plugging the electricity deficit that has led to power outages. The government, in partnership with Chinese construction firm Sinohydro, has completed the Centrajit power project. It's on 120 hectares of land and is expected to inject 25 megawatts into the national grid.
There's an enabling framework here. The government has opened up this space to private sector developers and investors to participate. We have received support from local institutional investors for expansion. The government itself has said we need at least 2,000 megawatts additional capacity from PV solar, from wind, small hydros, to be able to meet our objectives.
Centrogrid is among the 39 solar power projects that were approved by the government to tackle the electricity disruption. Despite the strides it has made, the project is grappling with challenges.
Every country, for it to develop renewable energy, you cannot just depend on the domestic market. There isn't enough depth. There's need for foreign financing support. And we need to improve on our access to foreign currency, either through the auction or opening up the sector to make it easy for foreign investors to bring money into the country and be able to repatriate interest payments and dividends and things like that. That is still a challenge. This is why you see that everybody is only depending on domestic financing, which has its own limitations.
Centrogrid currently produces 2.5 megawatts from this single unit. This is estimated to provide power to approximately 1,000 houses. Plans by the government to scale up electricity output are on course, and a projected capital input of around $30 million will be channeled towards those ventures. Wilkis Anyabwa, CGTN.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up. Retail associations in the US are mounting pressure on the Biden administration to resume trade talks with China. And given the Taliban takeover in the country, Afghanistan's currency has plummeted to record lows. Details coming up next.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to the program. Leading retail associations in the US are appealing to President Joe Biden to resume trade talks with China and to ease a burden, at least as far as tariffs are concerned, on US firms. They say that the tariffs imposed on Chinese products are hurting American enterprises and consumers. CGTN's Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
American businesses are hurting from US-imposed tariffs that were supposed to pressure China to change its trade practices. One of them is United Legwear and Apparel Co., which holds exclusive rights to source, manufacture and import brands to the US, such as Puma, Hurley, Champions and Skechers.
Vietnam was shut down until very recently.
Christopher Volpe is the Chief Operating and Financial Officer. He says the tariffs have forced them to shift their sourcing base for some of their products out of China to other countries in Southeast Asia, North Africa and Latin America. They've moved apparel and other products elsewhere, but for now 90% of his legwear products are still made in China at a cost.
We manufacture over 350 million pairs of socks a year, and the demand for that and the need for infrastructure is tremendous. And these third-party developing nations don't have the infrastructure that China has, which has been built over decades. So it's been very challenging.
That's been the common experience of many companies in the United States since the tariffs were first introduced by former President Trump in 2018. A number of influential American business groups have written a letter urging the Biden administration to restart trade talks with China and cut tariffs on Chinese-made goods. The National Retail Federation represents 16,000 member companies across the United States. One official says businesses are facing a 25% tax on products imported from China, costs that are sometimes passed on to consumers.
So we've seen a significant impact of the China tariffs, not just on imports of finished goods, which are key for NRF members, but also inputs to production that U.S. manufacturers need, whether it's component parts, chemicals, or other things they need to make products here in the United States and then export them back out. So those tariffs from the outset, we've always said, have been a tax on U.S. businesses. And to date, U.S. Customs and Border Protection has collected close to $100 billion in tariffs. Those are taxes on U.S. companies. It's not China who pays the tariffs, but U.S. importers who pay the tariffs, and unfortunately end up passing those along to consumers.
Well, business groups say the tariffs are adding pressures and costs onto U.S. companies already suffering in the COVID-19 pandemic. Add to that shipping and container delays. Well, even though retail sales have rebounded to pre-pandemic levels, some businesses have already gone under. For policy research group American Action Forum, it's clear the tariffs have had a negative impact, costing the U.S. economy and especially business about $50 billion a year.
We would really like to see the United States embrace its traditional role as the leader of free trade. That means allowing U.S. businesses to really take the best position that they themselves can find themselves in. Now, at the same time, there can be more targeted mechanisms by the United States.
The White House press secretary recently said that President Biden plans to continue using everything in his toolbox to fight against unfair trade practices. There's an ongoing review of policies, but no clear timeline. For U.S. businesses, any change to lift the burden of tariffs can't come soon enough. Caroline Malone, CGTN, Washington, D.C.
On to Afghanistan now, where the Afghan currency, the Afghani, is trading at record lows due to a severe shortage of American dollars. The head of Afghanistan's central bank, Ajmal Ahmadi, he's already moved out of Kabul, said on social media that the bank could not receive any more US dollars since last week Friday. The US has frozen nearly $9.5 billion worth of assets belonging to the Afghanistan central bank as it tries to keep a Taliban-led government from accessing the money. This is what the Afghan central bank governor says about the situation.
And I think moving forward now, there's going to be significant economic hurdles. First of all, I would expect that the U.S. would freeze the international reserves and make them inaccessible to the Taliban. So if that happens, the international reserves, instead of being more than 9 billion, will just become whatever remains in the country, a very small fraction. As a result, the currency is likely to depreciate, inflation is likely to spike, and that's going to make it more costly for everyone to buy basic commodities such as food, wheat for bread, etc. And so given that situation, I'm fearful for the economic future of Afghanistan.
Still in Afghanistan, Sean Calebs is looking at what it takes to run a business in the country and the challenges that now lie ahead.
As a woman who owns and operates a restaurant in Afghanistan, Laila Haidar will never be confused with a wilting flower. Headstrong, uncompromising, and demanding. She's trying to allow color to flourish in a drab and dangerous nation. Years ago, with $200 and a wealth of determination, Haidar opened a restaurant. It's a rarity in Afghanistan. a place where men and women can mingle together, drink tea, and relax.
It was surprising for people to see a woman establishing a restaurant, but I had to do it. I needed a source of income to start my projects.
This is her main project, just a short drive from her restaurant.
Who will take care of you? Are you a user? Do you want to stop?
Haidar wades into a world where men are addicted to heroin, in a nation where the drug is cheap and easily found. She has emerged as a powerful and unlikely human rights hero to get them off drugs and into treatment.
How difficult was it at first for a woman to approach the drug users? Did they reject you?
I think addiction is kind of a treatable sickness, and you need to fight against it, and that is right. An addict won't get clean with a single shower, but eventually he can be cleaned and saved.
At the rehab center she founded, doctors and counselors can help men such as Hussein Dad.
To be honest, I was tired of addiction, and no friends or relatives to ask for help.
They bear the scars of the past, but now have a future. Thousands have received help here over the years. Haidar says the uniform and shaved head helps keep the recovering addicts from running away. Despite a regimen of strict rules and demands, recovering addicts all call her mother. She says about 1 in 5 are able to stay off drugs.
Is it going to be hard for you to stay clean the rest of your life?
I think the problem lies on with me. If I make contact with drug users again, I think I will get addicted again. It's that simple.
She's one of the few women in Afghanistan who drives and often refuses to wear a headscarf.
I believe human rights are women's rights, and I will fight for them.
Now, sales of British wine apparently are rising. 8.7 million bottles produced in 2020. Demand has steadily increased over the years as quality does improve. And now many domestically produced wines are winning international awards. They've been boosted by warmer weather and a trend to shop more locally. So more and more wineries are setting up shop every year. In fact, the forecast is that by 2040, the aim of the British wine industry is to be producing some 40 million bottles every year.
British wine, a surprise success and a growing industry. The winemaking group, WineGB, says vine planting increased by 70% in the last 5 years, with around 800 vineyards in the UK now. Many are in the south, such as the Bolney Wine Estate in Sussex. Sam Lintner manages this family-run winery.
We've just had fruit set, so these are...
She says the quality of once shunned British wine is steadily improving.
And I think what happened over the years is we've actually learnt our craft. We learnt how to train the vines in a way that we can grow really good quality and healthy crop and ripe crop.
The estate carefully cultivates 6 grape varieties, tucking the vines in summer to help ripening. In winter, technology monitors for frosts, sucking cold air from the crop. The changing climate is favouring UK wine producers. Warmer temperatures and more days of sunshine, all helping boost production. The Bolney winery produced 150,000 bottles last year, and countrywide, wine production was up by a third. That's because people are buying more locally and importing less, though the government now says it will lift red tape on EU wine imports. But British wine producers don't believe their boom is Brexit-driven.
On average, over the last 10 years, we've probably grown between 25 and 33% every year, year on year. So the more wine we make, the more we sell and the more we keep growing. So it's really a question for us of catching up with production has to catch up with sales.
The aim is to mechanise more production to meet demand while keeping the quality in the fizz. Many of these wines are winning awards, levelling up to their European rivals.
So lots of lovely flavours and aromas coming through which people recognise, but just that little bit of freshness and cleanness coming through and slightly lower alcohol. So I think that really typifies our style.
The revival of British wine is also attracting people to wineries to sample the goods.
And this winery is expanding its range of still wines like these, as well as the sparkling. And throughout this summer, there's a rush of visitors coming here to taste them.
But there are challenges for the industry. A shortage of casual EU workers since Brexit, to help with harvesting. Yet as vines take 5 years to grow, the time to invest is now.
The growth trend is set to continue. Sparkling wine, obviously everybody knows about English sparkling wine and that's super popular. But what's really interesting now is just seeing the still wines now beginning to gather some traction.
Those still wines account for 1/3 of British sales, with sparkling the most popular. But whatever the type of wine, it seems British drinkers are set on staying close to home. Kitty Logan, CGTN, Sussex.
The use of solar energy is rising steadily in Brazil, and its growth is especially interesting in rural parts of the country. Paulo Cabral visited a farmer using this green tech and a plant where these solar panels are being made. That's our focus on What's Hot.
Brazil's abundance of sunlight has always been one of the key reasons for the country's agricultural success, and now farmers are increasingly relying on the sun not only to grow their crops and pastures, but also to generate electricity, a trend intensified by the extended drought, which depleted hydroelectric plants' reservoirs and increased the cost of energy. According to the Brazilian Association of Solar Energy, solar photovoltaic electricity increased exponentially over the last 5 years across rural areas of the nation. This producer says investing in solar power slashed their high electricity costs associated to pumping water out of their wells. They installed the solar power system about 5 months ago.
We always make decisions looking into the environmental issues, and in this case, it's also financially viable. We believe it will take less than 5 years to recover what we invested in solar energy. Lately, the price of electricity went steeply up because of the drought.
In recent years, interest in clean, renewable energy generation has significantly increased as the cost of solar panels has steadily declined.
Since 2017, the Chinese company BYD has produced solar panels and electric vehicles in Brazil. BYD has been investing heavily in increasing their production capacity, betting on the continued growth of solar generation in the country.
I think agribusiness is one of our biggest clients. BYD has sold a lot of projects for agriculture applications. Agribusiness has been one of the sectors that have grown more in Brazilian economy. They are consuming a lot of energy. Nowadays, the distribution companies cannot even bring more energy to some places, so solar is the only possibility they have.
We expect growth of solar generation in Brazil to keep going at a fast pace, because the country reunites the ideal conditions for the growth of this market. One reason is that we have a lot of sunlight. The region here with the lowest irradiation still has more sun than the region with the highest irradiation in Europe. And another reason is that the cost of electricity in Brazil is very high.
Brazil is one of the world's leading producers and exporters of agricultural products, and farmers here seem to be increasingly looking to solar energy as a tool to boost production and reduce electricity costs. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, Campinas, Brazil.
All right, then let's make a quick run through commodity prices. So August so far has been a month of losses for a lot of the commodities we track on the program, with the exception, in fact, of cocoa and coffee. Pretty much all the other contracts on your screen have fallen in price. Brent and WTI, they're down 6.1% and 7.6% respectively. Platinum's down nearly 4.6% this month alone. Copper forwards in London, they're down by about 5.2%. In fact, copper prices are back to levels we last saw around June. For most of these commodities, COVID's ability to disrupt not just demand, but also key logistics points, that remains a key concern. Here's what's coming up next. We'll introduce you to a female agriculture graduate in Nigeria who's opted to run into shoemaking.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Shoemaking is not typically what comes to mind as the career path for a female graduate in agriculture. But that's exactly what this young Nigerian, who's a focus farming story, has chosen to do as her life career. For her, it's not just about making money. It's more about impacting lives. Deji Badmus has that story on Grassroots.
One of the ventures fast becoming a delight for Nigerian women is the shoemaking business, which has been a career long dominated by men. Chika Majoku is a soil science graduate from one of Nigeria's reputable universities, but she's now a full-time shoemaker. Her decision to become a shoemaker is not by chance. She says a love for shoes made her decide to start making her own shoes by herself. And for her, it's not just about making money, it's about impacting lives.
I loved shoes, so I wanted to learn how to create different patterns, different types of shoes. That was why I eventually did it in 2012. And then in 2018, I thought, okay, I could actually use this thing that I was so passionate about to improve the life of others. I could use it to create employment if I teach people how to make shoes, especially people who are looking for jobs out there. If I could teach them how to make shoes, they could actually make a living out of it. So it was at that point I decided that, okay, I was going to go into this full time to impact lives as well as earn a living for myself also.
Though she took up an office job after graduating from the university in 2011, Chika says her passion for shoemaking kept pulling her to start a shoemaking enterprise. In 2018, she established the NCR Design School, where unemployed youths are basically taught shoemaking.
Our shoemaking program is available for everyone. You do not need a specific background whatsoever to enroll. You do not need prior knowledge because we're taking you from beginner's level. Now, it's open for the uneducated, out of school, educated but unemployed. It's just open for everyone. You do not need whatsoever certificate.
Her shoemaking school has expanded to include other entrepreneurial skills to its curriculum. Chika says she intends to build NCR into a leading vocational training center in the country and beyond.
We hope to be the leading vocational institute in Nigeria, having branches in different states, so that we can be able to reach a greater number of people, instead of having people give the excuses of risking their lives coming from different angles, different states. We hope to meet them all in the comfort of their zone, and also have virtual trainings where we can reach them in the comfort of their zone. So in the next 5 years, we hope to be the leading vocational institute in Nigeria. And how do we achieve this? We hope to achieve this by imbibing the spirit of entrepreneurship in every woman and youth in Nigeria.
With her passion and what she has achieved in such a short time, there's no doubting Chika's aspiration. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
General weakness seems to be a theme, not just in commodities, but also in currencies as well. Kenya's currency slowly creeping towards the 110 to the dollar mark in the second half of the year. Mean rate of 109.41 that we're seeing on the interbank market at the moment, which means on the retail side, you're essentially already well past 110. It's not the only currency that's been weakening since the quarter started, though. It's in hitting 6 to the dollar. Ghana said he has eased by around 2.25% to the American dollar. Is actually hitting record lows. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan